One might say starting two armies back to back might not be the best idea because of not being fully comfortable with the previous army you just started.
But sometimes you get such a good idea for an army that all you can say is fuck it, we balled. So yeah, you could say that we balled. That idea was the greatest anti-war film of all time, Full Metal Jacket, turned into an Imperial Guard army. Trying to convert it to tabletop form was a hell of a lot harder than I thought. I think I did an okay job, but in the future, the army will really come together. Vietnam War uniforms looked kind of boring, and there wasn't a whole lot of stuff that I could really do. Writing Born to Kill on their helmets was an obvious thing to do, but they're a lot smaller than I thought, so I compromised and decided to write it on the vehicles in the future. I did have some conversions and things to paint in mind, but I knew this was going to be hard. I got the combat patrol for the Guardsmen, but today I built only the basic infantry, and I will build the rest in a future video. Enough yapping though, let's get to the building. The box came with 20 men, but I will only be building 10 in this video, so I can get it to y'all faster. The first 10 will have more interesting poses, like running with knives or throwing grenades, to make a more exciting video, but the scheme will carry over to the other 10, whenever I get around to building them, that is. These 20 we'll call a platoon, and in total, there will be 2 grenade launchers, 1 radio man, 2 officers, and 1 melt-a-gun. The ones that I will be building in this video will have the cool stuff like the melt-a-gun and grenade launchers, so y'all can see how I did them. Everyone else will have rifles that look distinctly like the Private Pile Special, also known as the M14. During the building process, I cut off a cone from the end of their rifles, because my Marines don't believe in lasers. They believe in weapons of iron and wood. I also drilled out the gun barrels with PVC drill bits. After, I created a nick into it with an X-Acto knife. This adds a lot, to make them look like they shoot bullets and not lasers. For the most part, the building process was like any other, but I did try to make the heads match the pose. So a head screaming for the guy charging, etc. I made their bases look just like a destroyed city, since that's where Joker and the others fought during the movie. If you want to know how I made them, check out my last video. By the way, if you're inspired by something like a movie to make a themed army, you should totally watch it while you build or paint. I find that it really motivates me to get stuff done. So throughout the whole process, I watched Full Metal Jacket and listened to Vietnam War songs, and it really helped me get through their kind of boring scheme. Anyway, I did a zenithal prime for these guys, which is where you prime everything black and then spray white from above to simulate light on a model. I do this so I can slap contrast on things if I'm feeling lazy, and so I can more easily see all the details on a model. I'm not 100% sure, but I also think it makes any color you put on top of it brighter, which works for the way I paint. Alright, now it's time to start painting these guys. I base coated all of their armor bits with a dark green, and their underclothes with a dark greenish gray. Usually, I would pin shade all the folds and crevices, and then highlight the most prevalent features. But this time, I gave their under uniforms a dunking wash of brown to make these guys a little dirty, since they're not pretty boy space marines. I added a little bit of white to their under uniform color and highlighted the highest points of their fits, but I also highlighted according to light on shapes. Let's go on a quick lesson about light. Light appears on an object differently based on its shape. This picture depicts this pretty well. and you can see how the light looks different on each shape. An example of me using this is when I paint this guy's forearm sleeve, and since it's sort of like a cylinder, I painted it like in the picture, with a thinner area and defined perimeter. This is something to keep in mind while painting, but at the end of the day, just put the highlights towards the light. Anyway, I decided to use wet blending to make a nice smooth gradient on their armor, which will contrast well with their sort of dirty undersuit. The armor I only pin shaded so I can make some nice clean gradients. I decided to do some wet blends, in where I put the base coat color down on the areas that are meant to be darker, and while the paint is still wet, I put the highlight color, which is just a little white mixed with the base coat, on the areas that are meant to be a little brighter. I repeat the process with the highlight color, but this time with an even brighter highlight on top of that. I mix them together on the model a little bit with a brush, and boom, smooth gradients. I base coated their guns black to mimic the M16s they carried, and base coated the pouches and straps with a simple dark brown. For pouches and bags, it's a good idea to keep them simple, since no one will be staring at them really. Half the time I'll either use a quick coat of contrast to get it done easy, or I'll use a simple leather method. This method is to put a base coat of a darker brown, and then with a much lighter brown, put some scratches on the edges of the leather object. This is usually enough, but there are also more advanced ways to paint leather that I might make a video on someday. That's all the basic stuff, but the melt-a-gun is a different story. I wanted it to have a scorched metal effect, which I thought was gonna be hella hard, but it turned out it was hella light. You can probably vary the colors, but you should probably do this basic version first, just to get a feel for it. Base coat with the darker metal, and then highlight the top with silver. Dry brush the end of it with a bronzy metallic, like Balthazar gold, and then do the same thing but covering a lot less area with purple. Then I could finally do some fun things, like painting some kill tally marks on their helmets, but I held off on the decals, because I feel like it's not very Vietnam War-y. And that's it, for the basic soldiers that is. I'll probably build and paint the command squad next, which will be the first real piece of this themed army. These guys are basically just green guardsmen, and I'm aware of that, but I would have done more if I was frankly just a better painter. I probably would have painted camo on their helmets, or got more Vietnam War looking helmets from somewhere. But I'm really not too worried about that right now, because I want to build the vehicles and the command squad, and like I said earlier, I think that's when it will all come together. Just trust the process, and soon enough, we'll have the Orkland Raiders against the Full Metal Jacket Marines. Maybe I'll 3D print a Hartman miniature or something, but I'm all out. I gotta get to work on the cooler stuff anyway. Have a good one, chat.